This is the second part of a two-part video, so watch the first part before this, and yeah, whatever. In the previous section or video, I talked as a bystanding channer, God Christ kill me, but now in this video I will speak to you as a leftist Mexican. Why in the holy name of flat chests would I prefer Trump over Hillary? Isn't he menacing my country of building a massive wall that it will pay? Hasn't he said that some Mexicans are bad hombres, rapists, drug dealers and the such? Hasn't he promised to take economic steps to take jobs away from Mexico, to bring them back to America, to renegotiate NAFTA that, according to him, benefits us? Do I hate my country? Isn't it kind of anachronistic that an international leftist is supporting a figure that promises stronger borders and nationalism? First of all, let me say that I want my country to prosper, and I think a Trump presidency is for the best for my country. Not by some twisted, if the US is well, Mexico is too logic, nor because Trump makes an excellent leader, capable of sage decisions. If he isn't being ironic, that I honestly don't know, he's a retard that could never run a country well. I do not support him for his leadership, I support him for his idiocy. Some of the most naive Trumpetists listening might be thinking, ooh-wee, this stupid leftist binner cock really think Trump's gonna help his country? Make me laugh, you weebo. Trump is going to fuck you over and make America great again. No. Let me perform my mental gymnastics here. Let's go first with immigration, slide to dependence, and land on the NAFTA, and some general hopes for the future US-Mexico relations. Immigration. I have somewhat of a close relation to it, like most Mexicans do. I do not think there is a single Mexican that doesn't know someone close to him that left his land for another. In my case, it was my dead grandfather. He enlisted on the Bracero program during World War II. You still owe him some payment, by the way. I mentioned the Bracero program because it was, at least in paper, what I would consider a decent immigration policy, but that it unleashed illegal immigration to the US. Now, sure, it had its problems and abuses. Being a bracero was not the happiest thing in the world, and their rights were trampled almost systematically. But at least on paper, they had a case to present if they were wronged. We even have lawsuits still going on. They had a fixated wage, hours of work, basic necessities like shelter, food, etc., and I have no problem with this kind of immigration. But I do with illegal immigration, because workers' rights cannot be protected on an effective manner. It creates the perfect worker for the big capital, taking things back to 18th century England, oh boy. Indeed, perhaps, as Trump seems to suggest, and many American workers seem to believe, immigration from Mexico and Latin America is taking away jobs from Americans, simply because they are not Americans, and that they can have their rights trampled because of their illegal status. We, as one of our presidents beautifully put it, do the jobs not even niggers will do. Now, believe it or not, this is a common retort from the part of immigration advocates. They say that immigration doesn't take away jobs from Americans simply because those are jobs Americans are not willing to do. What the hell does that say about that job? That it is miserable, one, if one had the choice not to do it as it is offered, aka in terrible conditions, you won't do it. Why do Mexicans and Latin Americans do it? Well, the simple difference of wages, living standards, poverty, even a badly paid job in America can be better to what you can get over here. But the immigration advocate goes further. He might accept that they are miserable jobs, but he says, oh, but they keep the prices down for everyone. Would Americans pay for expensive watermelons? It's good for the economy. And this is the final fucking straw. Because they get into a crossroads. If they accept that immigrants' rights are trampled on and that it is a bad thing that should be stopped, but still cling to immigration, they have to propose a legalization policy, but that means having immigrants' rights recognized, putting them on the same place as Americans in regards to the job, driving the precious prices up. Oops, immigration might not be as good then. The other option is even worse, because it protects the precious low watermelon prices, costing immigrants their rights and human dignity. It means that for the sake of cheap commodities, they need cheap labor. Indeed, it is already done in many countries, including Mexico. Big corporations, like for example the big automotive industry, got out of America into other countries to look for labor they can abuse. The big capital requires an eternal subjugated worker class. It has no interest in bettering his conditions, it depends on those conditions. If syndicalism in the first world bettered the conditions of workers in certain jobs or drew horrible jobs out of their countries, the workers of other countries should also keep them away from them, unless of course they are well paid. But it won't work, in capitalism that is. If the workers' rights are defended, prices go up, if we go by the immigration advocate version, and that results in a shit show in the stocks. It seems that human rights and dignity and a healthy capitalist market are mutually exclusive. What? No one genuinely interested in a better future for humanity could advocate for illegal immigration in a capitalist society. Sure, as an anarcho-commie, I want people to be free to wander a borderless world, but when the conditions are right, when doing so won't interfere with the neat utopia. I can already hear the reformist calls from some of you. Fight me. Anyways, how else does illegal immigration perpetuate the capitalist model? I think it also serves as an escape valve for social unrest. This isn't something that I can prove, and it might just be a little cynic on my part to wish that people suffer just for them to rebel and trigger a social movement. But I really think this is an option. Just look at the Mexican Revolution a century ago. Even though we had some workers going to the United States, most workers were prisoners under communities, under haciendas. That in turn really did wonders to make one of the first real workers' revolutions of the world, even before the Russian Revolution. I'd argue that a lack of intellectuals on the part of revolutionaries didn't radicalize things at the point that it did in Russia, but we were getting there up until Cárdenas left the presidency. Hell, we even were a refuge to Spanish anarchists. And Fidel Castro admired Mexico and took it as an example for his own revolution. But I'm losing track here. Immigration. Illegal immigration to the US provides an easy and quick relief to the economic hardships that many people go through in this country. They go to the US, send remittances, they build a nice house, but the fundamental economic and social problems that made them live remain unsolved. As cruel as it sounds, I want the people of Mexico to suffer, so they resolve those problems. I believe in them. I believe that if they are forced to stay by a wall and a scary media show about Trump, they will prefer to stay here and solve their problems here. Though I have my doubts about the possibilities of a wall, at least the menace is enough. A physical wall is not going to stop much of anything anyways. I'm happy with the menace. But remittances, oh boy remittances. Trump has been very vocal about them, as money that goes out American hands and goes into Mexican pockets or something. Now this is ridiculous. As I said, Mexican and Latin American illegal labor is only good for a group of very select few, you know, the 1%. Mexican labor is one of the pillars that aggravates inequality. Mexico is not sucking money out of the US. It is gifting labor for a few dollars. Just imagine the money that could represent having all that labor comply with minimal US regulations. And they get abused for remittances that for a long time have been a primary source of foreign currency to Mexico. Now, my country and my government are profiting off the abuses of their own citizens abroad. I cannot conceive anyone that doesn't think that there is something wrong with this. Oh right, Porky. Now, even though the blame is almost entirely on the capitalists that are willing to use an illegal workforce, Trump, with his whole narrative, can take steps to put an end to this. While he might blame Mexicans and Latin Americans, which I do not agree with, his policy might be in the way to hurt the real bad hombres here. A stop to illegal immigration and remittances might be in the best interest for the workers of both countries. Americans will have miserable jobs, fairly paid, so they will be willing to do them, and Mexican workers will not suffer the abuses that they do in America. And maybe, just maybe, trigger a social movement to make their demands heard in their own country. I want to make Mexico more independent, not chained to the whims of America. And what is that other thing that makes us dependent from the US of A? Alright, NAFTA. The thing that Trump wants to reform or destroy if his demands are not met. Ah, NAFTA. Just who signed you? Clinton, oh boy. And who else? Alright, the one, his name I shall not speak. The great and marvelous person that brought neoliberalism in full force to my country, Don Carlos Salinas de Gortari. Who is he? Oh, he's the guy that practically made Carlos Slim. He just gave away the whole telecommunications industry to him, giving him the boost to make him one of the biggest porks out there. What's that? The free market expressed by NAFTA is going to bring Mexico into the first world? Oh, Carlos, you made that promise when I was born. What have I won? Alright. Alimentary independence out the window, along with ejidos, one of the greatest accomplishments of the revolution, anal blasted by big agricultural enterprises made to satisfy the exterior markets. Enjoy your guacamole, gringo. That thing costed us an enormous variety of maize crops. Thanks to your guacamole, I will no longer enjoy quesadillas made with rare maize, but with GMO crops. And oh boy, I love to go to the cinema and only see American movies. I just love to see Transformers 8 packed full of US military propaganda in my Mexican cinema. Never mind, we had a relatively healthy entertainment industry over here. I just love to go to obscure cinemas to enjoy the cinema of my people. You did well, Canada, you did well. And what the hell happened after NAFTA? Who could forget the tequila effect? Who could forget the hyperinflation, and who could forget the excellent, genius, and funnily enough, avant-garde solution to it? You think it's an injustice that the whole American people were made to pay the fuck-ups of Wall Street speculation? Mexico, always on the forefront of misery, had its own gigantic bailout 22 years ago. The Fobaproa, some might argue a direct consequence of NAFTA. Just a little sum that the Mexican state, with our taxes, paid to private banks. Just a small sum of a small estimation of $135 billion. Sure, a little more than a seventh of what the US Treasury gave to the banks. But we're talking about Mexico here. 1990s Mexico. Massive inequality riddled with poverty Mexico. An economical dwarf compared to the behemoth the US is. Oh, but NAFTA is a Mexican scam, right? Here again, the most naive Trump supporters think NAFTA is an unfair trade treaty with Mexico, with a deficit in which Mexico comes out winning. I really think, for the quickly exposed reasons before, that Mexico came out losing and is still losing with the treaty, but the reasons to break it have little importance as long as we break it. Just imagine this. You got duped by some guy on the street. You realize it, but sometime after the guy that duped you comes back and says that you duped him, that you scammed him, and he quickly proposes to undo whatever he did to dupe you. What do? Do you say to him, you scammed me, bro? Or do you just accept? The choice is obvious. I want NAFTA destroyed. Trump, for whatever idiotic reasons, is a chance of destroying it, as little as it is. Sure, it may not be as easy as a Ctrl-Z of the keyboard, but I prefer a Mexico without it. Who was the other option? The wife of the guy that signed it. Not in a million years. But I feel as though Americans are under the impression, both on the left and on the right, that Trump is a bad thing for Mexicans. But just who has been pushing that rhetoric here? Just who in Mexican politics is genuinely scared of Trump and its effects? Well, like in America, the mainstream media, because oh boy the media, especially Televisa, has had a ride with Trump over here. Just as a stupid experiment, I've been watching the news, the biggest and most watched news show in this country, the one done by Televisa, who practically owns the media in this country. And they just keep talking about Trump, his horrible immigration policies and the such. Just an estimate, about half the time on the news is a topic about Trump and how to make him look like an idiot or a Machiavellian genius. Look at it, the media conglomerate that spreads state propaganda is making telenovelas to bring home the point that illegal immigration is a good thing. And this is the media allied with not only the state, but with the Catholic Church, with links to the extreme right. What am I led to think? But just who else is on the hate Trump bandwagon? The right-leaning, kill Indians and make Mexico a theocracy politicians. Fox, the former Mexican president, from the right-wing party, you know, the same guy that I quoted a little while ago, goes on Twitter to make ridiculous insults to the God Emperor himself. He also goes into Conan's show, produced by Televisa by the way, to say fuck you to Trump. Hell, the whole right-wing, including the guy that started the Mexican drug wars, organized a demonstration to protest against Trump to unite Mexicans. Of course, almost no one went. But it is just proof that Trump is not under interest. Immigration and neoliberal policies are things that these politicians are interested in keeping. Their yapping on the news and on the streets confirms it. These guys are desperate. Anything that gets them this desperate is a good sign for me. Or they are just making a media show to naively promote themselves, who the hell knows. But besides that, I think Trump and his whole media impact has had an awakening effect on people, not only in Mexico but in America. With a Clinton administration, I think few Mexicans will really think about a relationship with gringos. Trump, with his whole negative and scary aura, is making Mexicans think, is our relationship with the US fair? How are we perceived over there to the point that building a marvelous wall between is an effective campaign promise? Even I didn't expect to see John Trump comparing Mexican immigration into the US with Muslim immigration into Europe. Are we perceived as that different? You heard me, John. And the one-sidedness of US-Mexico relations is just shining for the whole of Mexico to see. If Nieto, our current president, was already perceived as a puppet by a great part of Mexicans, seeing him look for concessions or hearing about Trump yelling at him on the phone just brings out to the front the poor leadership that we have. And Mexicans have, I think, a little more consciousness of the poor governance that we have. And menaces from Trump just put more pressure on them to change things. And even, as I said, in America, the whole power structure is bringing a much needed change to the way things are run. I think, I hope. Is that change for good? I don't know, I hope it is. At least it is not the status quo. But enough about Mexico. As an anarchist, I cannot ignore the rest of the world. Right. Much of Trump's campaign, and I think many of its policies, are in respects to the rest of the world. His rhetoric is one that I can get behind, at least in its effects, not really on its content. What I find most interesting about Trump in international relations is that while he built a whole narrative around greatness in America, it seems that he wants to make it weaker on the world stage. And that, by all means, is a great thing for me. A weaker America makes other countries more independent to experiment on other nation projects. But what do I mean with a weaker America? Well, his whole position surrounding NATO, and some declarations of removing military bases around the world for what he perceives as America giving free defense services. NATO, for a while now, has been the police of the world, with America on its head. It has been the armed forces of capitalist interests around the world, and when the guy in charge of it sees it as an unfair deal or something, it's a good thing. The US should not be policing the world. Nations nations have a right to determine themselves, without foreign interests in the way. No nation should have the right to be police of the world. And I'm not the only one interested in a weak America. Russia is interested on a weak NATO. I'd argue that that is their whole interest in interfering with US elections, if it even happened. Now, while I think that American interventionism is a bad thing, I do not wish for China or Russia interfering with world politics either. Some may argue that that will happen in the case of a weaker US. I really don't know. Russia, as far as I can see, is defending what little pride has left and can't really make a good contender to dominate militarily or something. But I might just sound very naive here, anything could happen. And China is, I think, the big threat. As much as I hate neoliberalism, China's own brand of state-controlled capitalism is just terrifying to think about. Maybe I've just been watching a whole lot of China Uncensored, but their human rights situation and their lack of freedom of speech is just terrifying. The whole situation in the South China Sea is also a real threat to world peace, and a weaker America might be a catalyst for a real conflict, but who knows? I sure as hell am not an expert on these matters, but there are two possible outcomes to this. Nothing happens, and America stops policing the world. Good. Or China takes center stage, aided by their mini emporium in Africa, and takes front stage in world politics, which I think is a lukewarm result. Just because it's a change of pace. Sure, China scares the shit out of me, but their military, as I've been informed, is still somewhat primitive, and their power to influence nations that are not peace poor, I think, is still quite limited and will remain to be quite limited. But not only in the military, but in the economic, I see Trump as a good. Particularly his desire not to sign TPP, which I perceive as a NAFTA on steroids, with the added bonus of doing horrors to internet neutrality. TPP is just another tool to aggravate inequality around the world, and especially on the countries that sign it. Having the head of the biggest economy in the world backing off those deals is a godsend to me. Though protectionism is not, in my opinion, the way to go, but a change of direction is sorely needed. And America with Trump on its head might lead the way for other ways to administer wealth. Let me finally touch the Muslim problem. This is more delicate, and I might just be saying stupid shit here. Though I fundamentally don't agree with many of Trump's statements, I think, as in many things regarding Trump, that a change of discourse is beneficial. Though I ultimately think that all cultures are the same, that doesn't mean that I don't think they have reprehensible elements. That is why I think they are equal, because all of them have shitty parts. I stand with Zizek on this. I am tired of not criticizing elements of foreign cultures like we do with Western cultures, because of some perceived structures that make people coming from them not responsible for their actions. But for some strange reasons, the West is responsible. This just makes Muslims, Asians, Africans, hell even Mexicans for some, not moral agents. They make us less than human. As I said in my bullfighting video, traditions and culture are not immune to moral scrutiny. And if some elements of Islam are turning people violent, then I think it is reasonable to address it. Or better yet, make people individually go through the same moral standards that everyone goes through, regardless of color, culture or religion. That is true equality. And if we are still not sure what elements of Islam or elements of character make some people go violent, I think it is reasonable to ban their entry to the country, at least for a while, as Trump seems to suggest, until we figure out what makes them violent. Though I think the ban could be a little more nuanced. Indonesia, for example, could be exempted. Muslims there seem to be quite peaceful. And please do not interpret this as me saying that Islam is inherently violent or something. I love some aspects of it, but just as I am ready to accept that some elements of Christianity can make people religious, Puritan zealots, unable to accept abortion on condoms, or even make sick secluded obscurantist communities, I am ready to accept that Islam can throw people in jihad. It's called being congruent. If, in the future, Iran decides to ban Catholics for for a while because we have an epidemic of gay killing squads, I wouldn't blame them, even if Mexico were in flames because of a civil war. And of course, even if I am ready to accept that Islam can turn people violent, it doesn't mean that I deny the whole geopolitical reasons for much of radical Islamism to turn violent. You know, senseless bombing, CIA involvement and economical support of radical Islamists to prepare for it, combat socialist and communist ideas to propagate in the Middle East, because of the Cold War and stuff. Those reasons alone are enough for people of just about any religion to hate whoever did that to them. And many NATO members, I think, share a great deal of responsibility of the extreme Islamist shitshow in the Middle East. But that is, in a great deal, responsibility of the leaders of NATO countries, not really of the citizens of said countries. Right now, as it stands, even if those countries and its populations have responsibility on the decade-long shitshow that is the Middle East, yet another terrorist attack will do horrors to the already tarnished relationship. Let's calm our heads and live apart for a while. And of course, do not interpret this either as me saying that Islam and Western ideals are inherently incompatible. They aren't. There are countless examples of this, and apparently Libya has had some success of liberalizing certain aspects of their governance while still retaining their Muslim-devoted majority. We can coexist. I want to coexist. But just letting everything fly is not an option. In my Nietzsche utopia, bans will not be necessary because we will have solved those petty differences. But as I said, this is a long-term goal. But enough about positives. Trump, as I said it, was not my guy, and as an American, especially one that is preoccupied with making America great again, I would not be overjoyed. To close this, I would like to touch upon two negative points. One is that some people believe Trump is going to bring fascism to America. But again, Zizek, another extreme leftist, coincidence, puts it, he will not. I mean, sure, he has some fascist traits, but all in all, his narrative, if we take in the whole context and the rectifications he made along the way, is somewhat moderate. Even with Mexico, he has praised some aspects of Mexico. It is not full-on hate like Hitler with the Jews, or Mussolini and Franco with commies. Plus, even if he is the second coming of Hitler, I think he has a sizable opposition that won't let him become chancellor with dictatorial powers. He has a whole intelligence against him, even Republicans can be wary of him, hell they recently opposed him. He is a minor threat, but feel free to call me naive. Though there is one major negative in Trump, and it is not one that I can twist and turn mentally to make it seem good. His whole climate change agenda, and him appointing deniers of it. That is just bad for everyone. Sure, China also plays a big part in it, but denying that the US has some responsibility is just insulting. Or even suggesting that it is a ploy to slow down American enterprise is just Deus Ex levels of conspiracies, and having that kind of thought running the show in America might be bad in the long run. Though I predict Trump will not be re-elected, and we will hopefully have someone that makes active policies to combat climate change in the future. Let me finally say that the whole Dakota pipeline affair and the way Trump has handled it really, but really disgust me. Anyways, these are some of my reasons, I may be forgetting some, to think that Trump is a good net for Mexico, and in part for the world. Though Trump is, as I see it, a safe bet for change, the extreme right in Europe is not. Marine Le Pen in France is a real non-nuanced danger, and I pray to the myriad of weep gods that she doesn't get close to power, even though the same retards that seem to naively push Trump are pushing her as well. Though I really think the French are not that stupid, and I trust in them. I hope you at least found my video interesting, and you are free to ram my ass in the comments. Like last time, they really interest me. America was never great, by the way, and if you work, you lose. Adios.